Hello, and welcome to another reflection, contemplation on this Aries North Node, Libra South Node journey that we are all taking together. It is quite the adventure into ourselves, and today I want to just kind of catch up on what has been unfolding in these last few days for me. Has had a very interesting net effect on me as far as like burning down a lot of what feels like it's been holding me back, as far as, ooh, here's some words that have been looping in my brain over and over, is using likability as currency. Likability is currency, that there's like such value in being likable. And I feel like I'm waking up to this because I have been like coveting and guarding my likability. Like it's a tool, like it's a resource, my likability. Like it has weight, it has value, it's an asset to me, my likability. And I just like, where I'm at right now, I'm like, that is my illusion of like, that's how I was keeping myself safe. The same way that some people may think that like a lot of money is going to guarantee your safety. Like I've been kind of playing at life in this way that says, if I'm really likable, then I'll be safe. Like if nobody criticizes me, if nobody tells me I'm wrong or bad, or, you know, like I've said before, I mean, I picture mobs with pitchforks, like setting me on fire. Like it's not like hate comments that I'm worried about. It's like real hate that like takes action and becomes violent in the physical world. Like to be afraid of that, I think, is part of our ancestral trauma. You know, like to treat likability like a survival tool, tactic, strategy, you know, like being unlikable, being unpopular, being hateable is historically, it doesn't go very well. Like, I mean, there are so many humans who think that it's their job to eradicate the things that they don't like. And so becoming somebody's object of dislike, I just like, historically, I've been like, you know what? No, thank you. Thanks, but no thanks. And here's what I'm discovering is like, this is very Aries North Node as far as asking myself the question, okay, yes, likability as currency, but who's likable? Like whose likability? Who's liking who in this scenario? Because what I'm seeing is that in the times when I'm holding myself back because I want to be likable to other people, I'm like gagging at my own behavior. I'm like gagging at my own, like setting myself aside and putting on the mask that will get along with the person in front of me. Like I'm gagging at myself. I'm disliking myself in that moment. And so it's like, is it worth disliking myself to stay likable with other people? And that's where, you know, the answer for me is a resounding like, hell no. Hell no. Like me liking myself, me respecting myself, me honoring the authenticity of the unique extension of source energy that I am, and to not trim any of that away so that other people can have a nice fluffy experience. That's not my job. And I've been living like it's my job for 3.5 decades on this planet, pretty much. Up until and possibly still today, you know? Like, I am a very accommodating person. I'm a very open, go with the flow of what's happening in front of me. Like I'm very open, and in a lot of ways that is like part of what I love so much about myself, is how open I am to hearing anyone about anything, you know? Like I respect the person standing in front of me enough to listen to what they're saying, and I love that about myself. And I'm seeing where it goes back to the whole unpopular opinion thing, where there are frequently times where I will select the mask that I want to wear in this moment based on like, who do I want these people to see me as? You know, what role am I trying to play here? Let me pick out the mask that fits that role. And in my coaching space with my coach who's working with me to, you know, expand my sense of self, like in my coaching space yesterday, she asked me a question that I've never been asked, that I've never like even tried to answer out loud. And it feels very much in line with the Aries North Node and kind of this overarching lesson plan of these 18 months that we're under this transit. She asked me, like, if you took everybody else out of the equation, how do you want your fire to be? How do you want to, you know, be in this world? How do you want to exist? Like, what is your beingness that feels raw and natural and primal, like instinctual? What is that? And forget about everybody else, like even just for a second. And what do you want to do? And I said some things and I came to some clarity that like I hadn't had before. And it was so interesting because what I want is to be a catalyst. That's what I want. I was like clear as day. Like the first word that came to mind was like activator, catalyst. I want to throw sparks off of my beingness that land in the fields of other people's consciousness and start fires that burn down shit that's already dead. That's what I want to do. I want to be a catalyst. I want the sparks of the things that I say to transform the people who are listening to it. And there's something coming to mind that I heard Lotus Tile Tarot say in one of her readings. I had her on the channel for a heart-to-heart once and absolutely love her vibe. And she said that basically like advising people about the reading that we are going to be talking about such and such topics. And so, you know, you may offend yourself by staying in this space. If you're not okay with discussion of these topics, don't stay. Otherwise, you're probably going to you're going to offend yourself. And like the way that she like just, nope, that's on you, buddy. Like don't offend yourself by listening to me if you don't like the sensation of the spark landing and the fire burning down the patch of dead grass that is just sitting there taking up space. You know, like if you don't want to transform, then this is not the space for you. If you don't want like if you don't want to see something from somebody else's perspective, like a true honest perspective, then this is not the place for you. And don't offend yourself by staying here. You know, like, oh my God, what a concept. Oh. Which brings me to another piece that is something Daryl Davis talks about, who is like quickly becoming one of my top role models at this time in my life. He is a race relations consultant and he specializes in civil discourse. He can have a conversation with people. It's a skill that he's so good at. That's like part of what he does, is have conversations with people who hate him, based on, well, they don't technically hate him, is a really important distinction, because they hate something that they think they know about him. That's what they hate, and they're assigning it to him. And so he says there's a big difference between someone being offensive and someone being offended. Big difference between being offensive and someone being offended, because basically what started Daryl Davis in his pursuit, he has a very interesting story. I'll link a couple of his interviews in the description box if you guys want to check it out. I cannot recommend it enough. And his TED Talk, that's probably a good, 20-minute place to start. I'll link all that down in the description. So he says that when he was 10 years old, he suffered his first racially motivated attack. And he tells the story of that, and he came out of it okay. He was relatively fine, but his parents, because of that, had to explain to him what racism is. And he flat out didn't believe them that could exist, because it was so illogical and irrational. He's like, they must be making this up. And then he had the second racially motivated attack happen to him a few weeks later. And then a few weeks after that, Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated. And he was like, it was at that point that he understood his parents had been telling him the truth, and that racism is real, and that it is real that someone can hate you without even knowing you. They can have a story about you in their head and hate that story so much that they think they need to harm you, and they don't even know you. How can somebody hate me if they don't even know me? And that's the thing that I want to throw out there, kind of on the flip side, as far as this whole dancing for worthiness thing that I've heard, dancing for worthiness. Yes, wow, what a slip. Dancing for worthiness, dancing for likability, right? I'm hustling for likability. How can someone like you if they don't even know you? They have a story about you, and they like the story, and I'm trying to behave in a way where I'm not challenging the story that they're making up about me in their head. I gotta say, becoming aware of these things within myself is, that's why self-awareness is so powerful, and spending time introspectively and looking at yourself and being honest with yourself about your patterns and your tendencies and the reasons you're reaching for certain behaviors. Self-awareness is so powerful, because as soon as you see it, you can't unsee it. It's the self-awareness itself is alchemical in nature, because it's like travel almost. It does have a very Sagittarian feel to it in general, as far as when you travel, you can't unsee what you saw. And then when you go back home looks different, because now you saw something completely different, right? You can't unsee it. And that is where I'm at right now. And I feel like hustling for likability is, hopefully, I do believe that it is an era that's coming to a close in my life, where basically I feel myself adjusting my values. At a very base level, I feel like I've had the approval of other people in a higher slot without even really meaning to, or knowing it, or consciously realizing what I'm doing. I am placing other people liking and approving me higher a lot of the time over being honest and being authentic. And I have so much so that I have this whole contemplation about, why can't I share my unpopular opinions? Why is this such a mystery to me? Because the top value, and not necessarily the top, but above my authenticity and wanting to be honest, is needing to stay likable by other people. And bam, I'm stuck. How do I be honest and stay likable at the same time? Dude, that's a revealing question about what your values really are. And so what I'm seeing is that, I'm not saying that it's not possible to be honest and authentic and stay likable at the same time. I think that's probably possible. Some people are going to like you, some people aren't going to like you no matter what you do. So probably there is a subset of people who are going to love your authentic self. Like that just only makes sense. Just like there's a subset of people who really like your inauthentic self or your held back self, your hustling for likability self. There are people that like that version, and there are people that are repelled by that version. Just like on the flip side, when I am being my authentic self, when I am being my honest self, there are going to be people that like it even better than what I was doing before, and there are going to be people who can't take it. They're repelled by who I am now. And that's the part where it's not that I'm saying it's not possible. What I'm saying is, like, in the instances when it's not, in the instances when it's not possible to be authentic and stay likable at the same time, which are you choosing? Which is in the higher spot? And I am very much coming off of my own experience to say, like, I have a thing where I feel like I am tongue-tied when it comes to sharing unpopular opinions. And I feel like the knot in my tongue around the unpopular part was there all along. It's like I'm factoring in my likability scale. I'm like putting a really heavy weight on my likability. And it's like, if this is a risk to my likability, then I can't be honest. You know, like that's a shitty, tough place to be in, is what it is. It's really difficult. It's like your hands are tied behind your back. So I feel myself untangling. I feel my literal values are updating themselves in real time, including this conversation is like really helping me to see what I'm doing here, as far as like in those situations where the choice is, am I going to be honest or am I going to stay likable, acceptable, appropriate, whatever word you want to put on there. If I have to choose, I'm gonna be honest. I'm gonna be honest, and I like the holding myself back part was the effect of my likability is more important, right? Likability is currency. My likability is a more valuable currency than my authenticity. And basically I'm seeing like a big stock market chart. Like basically those valuations have flipped. My authenticity is now the more valuable currency, and my likability is worth less to me. You can pay me in likability or like pay me in liking me or whatever, but there's this like, I can't unsee it, that like when you like me, you're liking yourself. When you don't like me, you're disliking yourself. So like, I mean, what people think of me, it just is like just bouncing off of me. Like it just won't stick no matter if they like me or they don't. And honestly, it's a really, really beautiful sensation, because what it's allowing me to feel is like when people like me, it doesn't move me around inside of myself. It doesn't like change anything. And what I'm seeing in kind of parallel to that is then when somebody doesn't think about it the way I think about it, or they don't like what I said, or they're not a fan or whatever, like then there's like a repulsion that happens, and like that's not my person. It's like there's efficiency in authenticity that is like helping me to see this like protective mechanism of authenticity. I've felt it. I've called it many things. The grandpa bubble of protection was its first name. My ancestral bubble of protection is another name that I've talked about a lot. And authenticity is essentially this bubble of protection that will repel the people who are not meant to be in space with you. You know, like there's this sensation of or like the emotion of disgust. I talked about this a little bit in that video where Atlas of the Heart was on the still. I'll link it in the description. I forget what I called it, but I talked about on there where like, you know, energy to energy, we have a sense of like who is meant to, you know, merge more together with us, and who do we not want to merge together with more. And honestly, like what I'm realizing is again, like when you're liking me, you're liking yourself. And when you don't like me, you're disliking yourself. And so like when there is someone who I like, I'm liking myself. And when there's somebody that I dislike, I'm disliking myself. And either way, it doesn't really have anything to do with the other person because it's all my experience. You know, I was listening to this podcast this morning on Emily Fletcher's podcast, and why isn't everyone doing this? And she said the line, like, basically everyone is always commenting on their own lens through which they are perceiving reality. So like someone likes you, they're seeing something really cool on their lens. Someone doesn't like you, they've conjured something really ugly on their lens. Again, it's all just the story that they have about you and how they feel about that story. My coach said yesterday, like, you know, we all are having our own experience and then we put other people's faces on it, you know, like. And how I would translate that for myself is I have this whole thing of this whole likability is currency, like this story in my head, and it has value, it has validity, it has like some kind of like logical fabric to it. So it works as an illusion to what's really going on, which is me holding myself back, me wanting to protect myself, me wanting to, you know, avoid the pain that could come with some kind of conflict, you know, some kind of attack, some kind of threat. Like I am being pain avoidant in trying to stay likable. That's, I feel like this is a great place to say, like, kind of no matter what the shadow pattern is, I think a lot of our shadow patterns are coming out of pain avoidance. You know, like when we are unwilling to feel pain, when we are unwilling to allow that part of the human experience to exist, we shove that down into our shadow, and then what comes out is just the impact of like trying to avoid the pain. So people pleasing, pain avoidance, workaholism, pain avoidance. Like it all comes out as far as like, you know, how are you uniquely trying to numb out the pain that is only real to being alive on this planet? So we all have our different vices, and me hustling in this dance of likability is one of my vices, is one of the ways that I allow myself to believe that I don't have the power to be doing any better. You know, like, well, I have to keep myself safe. I have to stay likable. Like, I want them to be able to hear me. I have all these stories of reasons why I have to keep myself small. And what I'm seeing is this Aries North Node is like dropping a match right on that story. And like, it is burning, and it is like the phoenix rising from the ashes of, I am transformed. I am seeing that other people liking me or not liking me has nothing to do with me, no matter which way it goes. So trying to protect myself using this, what is now looking more and more like a flimsy illusion of safety in the first place. It's not even real. Like, but I've been believing it's real and holding myself back in the illusion of believing it's real. And the thing is, like, that's why I say, like, oh my gosh, this is such a perfect example. You can be acting in alignment with your heart. You can be like knowing in your bones that you are delivering justice. You're like improving someone's life. You're giving something of meaning and value and impact that is for the highest good of them, and like just lights you up to be able to do it. And they can throw it back in your goddamn face. You know, they can tell you that's the worst thing I've ever heard. Oh my God, I cannot believe you said that to me. It's like, what? What's going on? What's happening? You can be the most lovable, giving, generous creature, and they can still hate your guts. You know, like you can't win. You can't win that game of like being small enough to be likable. Like if you take up any space at all, someone will have a problem with you at some point. And then it's like, okay, so then how much space do you want to take up? Like, how much do you want to put yourself out there? How much do you feel you need to put yourself out there? Like, I feel like I don't even understand yet the full ramifications of this owning authenticity intention, directive, mission, like soul work, like this dharma of owning authenticity, of like in a public space, unraveling the layers of my own conditioning until I get to the authentic core of myself, like on facet after facet after facet after facet. Like, this work of doing this in this way feels so important to me to do it. And I don't even know, like, what's it for? What's it like? Why do I have to do it like this? You know, like, you don't get to know that. Just keep doing it. I'm like, okay, cool. It feels good. It feels right. It feels right place, right time. It feels like energy moving in a way that feels authentic and in the flow state. And then when I'm done, I feel like satisfied and full and fed, and somehow at the same time, like emptied in a really pleasurable relief kind of way. Like all of the above. And so, yeah, like I do this work because it feeds my soul, and holding myself back in owning my authenticity has felt like a really important tangle that I have needed to unravel ever since I started this channel. Like, that's essentially what I circle around, is leaning into authenticity and all the reasons why we don't. You know, like, we have reasons, good ones, that live in our nervous systems, that creep up through our monkey mind and our lizard brain, and they just like take us over without us even knowing it. Like, it's so ingrained sometimes that like we can't even see it until beautiful Libra South Node, somebody comes along and really exaggerates something enough that we either really, really like something in someone, or we really, really dislike something in someone. And again, it's all only ever seeing yourself more clearly. You know, like, for example, if you like, for me, an authenticity, like if you really are, you know, the words I give to it, I'm allergic to inauthenticity, fakeness, like putting on masks. Like, it just grates on my soul. And who's guilty party number one? I'm doing all of these things. And so when I see somebody who is putting on a mask, or is pretending to be something, or is like playing a part, or putting on a show, or whatever it is, like, I mean, I remember like 3 or 4 or 5 years ago, there's one person that comes to mind where like I just almost felt sorry for her. I felt pity for like the, you know, why are you doing that? Like, God, that's just like, blah, gross, you know? And like, I thought it about her, and did for years. And it's only like in these last couple of days that I am fucking seeing that, like, who's guilty party number one, you know? And that's not to beat up on myself at all. That's honesty. That's, you know, calling it like I see it, that I am choosing masks to wear. I am allowing myself to portray the likable side of myself, and that's it. You know, like, I'm doing these things. So taking ownership of what we think of other people is a really empowering place to be, right? Like, if you like someone, this I think goes along really well with, like, you know, the attraction field that happens between people, where you are really attracted, like you just love them to pieces. You just want to lick their face. Like, just something about them is like, intense like and love. And I want that. Like, my opinion on that is that you already possess it. And that the reason you can see it in them is because you already have it, and that you're looking in a mirror. So before you run away and, you know, join the circus, or like run away and like torch your whole life so that you can like be with them, think about like, it's you. You are this, you know, like in the early stage of a relationship when you're like, they're just so sweet and they're such a good listener and they're so loving and generous and giving. You're describing yourself. You're describing you. And I think when we start owning the good that we see in other people, as that's a reflection of us, right? Like when I love someone, that's me seeing like what's lovable about myself. And when we start doing that, I think it gets a lot easier to be honest about the bad, you know, the bad, the parts of ourselves that we deem unlikable, not because other people aren't going to like them. We can tell ourselves that's what it is, but we don't like it. We don't like it. And the thing about that is that a lot of times we were trained not to like it. We were told that that part isn't good. Don't do that. No. Carly, don't do that anymore. No. We don't want to hear that. And when you're little and you like take that personally, you know, like one example that comes to mind is I was singing and I was like maybe 6 or 7 years old. It was like one of the songs for my school music program or something, and I had it stuck in my head and I'm singing in my grandma's kitchen. And she's like, Carly, that doesn't sound nice. And then just goes back to what she's doing. And my little 6, 7-year-old brain read between the lines, so stop doing it. And that doesn't sound nice. And I heard that. I mean, she gave it to me like that's what she meant, was my voice sounds bad. And the thing about music is that, God damn it, it's like one of the most subjective things on the planet. So what she meant was, I don't like the sound of your voice. That was her honest truth, was I am not a fan of your voice. What she didn't acknowledge at all, and she definitely didn't tell me, was other people might, but I don't. You know, there's nothing wrong with your voice. I don't like it, right? Like, she didn't take ownership of her truth. She made it my problem. And we do that to people all the time. And so another one that comes to mind that I'm like really having to own as I step into, why do I hold myself back? One of the biggest complaints that I have about myself is my harshness, my abrasiveness, my directness, and I have a sharp tongue is another way that I would say that, of like, I can think, or I can talk without thinking, like, and all of these things too are things that I've been told about myself. You know, like, again, I go back to when someone tells me that I have a harsh way of speaking, could that possibly be their way of saying I have a tender way of listening? You know, like, doesn't that say something more about them than about me? Like, if they're not liking my harshness, is that not them judging the harshness of themselves? Like, the things that we judge in other people are the things that we worry about being judged in us. And my harshness is one of the ones that multiple people over the course of my lifetime, and I don't know if it's because I'm a girl and they think I should, like, I'm like extra not allowed to be harsh, but many of them were men and were very gentle, soft-spoken men who were giving me this feedback. So it wouldn't surprise me at all if they had their own harsh side that they didn't let themselves express. But that is one of the main ones that's like this roadblock, this like 20-foot wall standing in front of me, as far as like, well, but you know, you can speak your truth, but like, just don't be harsh about it. The fuck? Like, where does that even come from? Like, and I wonder, I would be so curious, like, what's your version of that? Like, you can speak your truth, but don't be blank about it. Like, another one that comes to mind about myself is whiny. Needy is another one. Dramatic is another one. Like, these are all adjectives that other people told me, that's why that's not going to work for me. You know, you're being too needy. And what they are saying is, I do not have the resources to take care of you. You know, like, I don't have as much as what you need. That's what they're saying. When they're saying you're too needy, they're saying you're too needy for me. I don't have what it takes. And so often, I know this is what I did, I learned how to take care of my own needs. I like just was like, oh, I'm too needy, so here, let me not need as much from other people. And now I have a really hard time needing anything from anybody, right? Like, I'm very self-sufficient, almost to a fault. And opening up and letting other people support me, letting other people see my vulnerability and my in progress stage, and not lay 1,000 layers of polish on top of it. Like, that is definitely the leading edge of where I am, is, you know, being honest, not likable. And I don't have it all figured out. By any means, I'm very much a student in the field and wanting to continue to discuss the layers that are revealing themselves to me. And what I'm seeing right here, right now, is as we go through this Aries North Node chapter, that there is this kind of like overarching umbrella of, we are getting to refine our understanding of our own personal identity, and that building our understanding of our identity is not all about liking everything, right? Like, it's not all ponies and rainbows and sunshine and puppies, right? Like, it's the things that we dislike have just as much, if not even more, potential energy in them, as far as like what you can harvest, what you can reclaim out of something. Like, when you strongly dislike something, the fire that puts in your belly, like, it ignites a piece of your identity. Like, there's that Aries side of, like, you know, the black and white, like the contrast of, honestly, the easiest way to see who you are is to have an opponent who represents the exact opposite. An opponent, opposite, like the opposing viewpoint, the opposite side. Because in seeing what's so wrong with them, what you're saying is, this is what I like about myself. This is what I want for myself. This is who I am. Right? Like, that contrast is clarifying about us to ourselves. So the things that we like are important about understanding our identity and who we are in this world and all of that. But so are the things that we dislike. And so I want to, you do what you got to do. But like, I gave myself a permission slip. I wrote it, "Dear Carly, you have permission." Yada, 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 signed, Carly. I gave permission to myself to dislike things and people and energies and behaviors and words and postures and vantage points. And there are things that I like and there are things that I dislike. And like, the things that I dislike, when you start looking more deeply into the pile of basically piled up, discarded, unpopular opinions that I have over here to the side, that like, as I start getting them out, I'm like, guys, it's a lot. The unpopular opinions, what they is all the shit I don't like. I don't like this, and 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 I don't like this. And those are the unpopular opinions. It's like, I wasn't letting myself dislike anything. I wasn't letting myself have a dissenting opinion about anything. Which is pretty exhausting because I feel like we really can't help ourselves. It's like, again, it's very natural for, in that Aries sense of like who you are, you know, my openness to all things is very Gemini, very Pisces, and I am those things too, right? Like I am vast and I do have a lot of depth and I do have a lot of spaciousness where, yeah, I mean, I can go into a lot of different places, but that doesn't mean that they're all who I am. And it doesn't mean that there's not still like a center core of consistent beingness as I travel into all of these different spaces within myself and out in the world. So that's very much where I'm at as far as having my own permission that it's safe for me to dislike things, dislike what somebody says, dislike a whole person, dislike. I get to dislike. There's like fucking freedom in that I just like can't even tell you. Like, feels so good to get to have a dissenting opinion, to get to free yourself from the shackles of having to be agreeable, forcing yourself to be agreeable no matter what. And I just, oh yeah, I hope that this is kind of the beginning of the end of that pattern of behavior within myself. And as always, only time will tell. So gosh dang it, guys. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. This has been an absolute pleasure. This is one of the times when this was like totally recorded straight through, like never lost my train of thought, never faltered, stumbled, anything across this energy, because again, like very much taking my likability out of it and just being real. And even in the sense where we didn't really get into any unpopular opinions this time, I don't think, you know, as I practice even in like a lower stakes conversation like this one, still taking everybody else's opinion out of it and just flowing with what's true and what's real and what am I seeing, what's going on in the grid of my experience. Because ultimately, like, you know, these transmissions are for me. And here's my likability creeping back in. I don't want to like burst your bubble if you think like this is for you. And like, I do genuinely have a very giving heart where like I can very easily get twirled up in the idea that these are for other people. But ultimately, this experience was a big tangled up piece of energy that was living inside of me that needed to be put into order and expressed through this process of giving it words and giving it life and releasing it from my body, like setting the genie free from my body that like, nope, it doesn't live in here anymore. And it isn't really for anybody else. It's for the energy getting to come out in the way that it needs to, and holding myself back, keeping myself small, stunting that energy has been backing it up into my grid. So like I say, there's like a whole pile of unpopular opinions that have been discarded and not allowed to come out that are still living inside of me. And this feels a little bit like the floodgates opening. So let this be, let this be a little bit of a warning, a little bit of a friendly, like, hey, heads up, 4 on the golf course, like coming in, incoming, coming in hot, as far as like Carly is taking likability out of the equation, and Carly is going to be a whole lot more honest about Carly's mountain of unpopular opinions and the things that Carly doesn't like about this world. And I think this is what it is. This is the era of myself that I'm coming into. For any of you who are enjoying it and want to hang out, obviously I'm putting it on YouTube. I want you here. I want you to get whatever it is that you're meant to get from this space. I'll leave that between you and you. And yeah, I would imagine that anybody who isn't into it is eventually going to fall away. And going to be repelled by some of the things that I say and going to want to project their dislikes onto me. And like, the more I'm seeing that giving people something to react to, even if they dislike it, it's clarifying. Sometimes the contrast, the dislikes, are even more clarifying than the likes. So, you know, like, there's part of me that's like, the currency of dislikability, like a whole new world opening up as far as, you know, is my top value to be liked, or is it to add something valuable to the world? Because I don't think you can, those two things aren't synonymous. That like, if I'm liked, then it means I'm adding value, and if I'm disliked, it means I'm not adding value. It doesn't mean that at all. You know, you can be really disliked and add tremendous value to the planet. You can be really liked and add absolutely nothing. So again, like, what is my top value? And values are, oh gosh, I mean, I feel like we could do a whole nother thing about that, as far as like, it is such a sliding tectonic plates of like shifting of consciousness, of like, what is the ground you're standing on? What are those things at the top of your list that are most important to you? And what's not that? And this demotion of likability, this allowing space for dislikability, where I'm allowed to be disliked and also I'm allowed to dislike. It's like both are opening up at the same time. And I gotta tell you again, like, the freedom within it, highly recommend. Highly recommend. So yeah, I think I'm gonna leave it right there. I've so enjoyed sitting in this space. I hope you did too. I would love to hear your thoughts down below. Take a second, like the video, subscribe, all that jazz. Share it with anybody you think might really enjoy it. Until next time, I do hope that you will be taking such good care of your beautiful self, the light, the dark, the likes, the dislikes, and so will I.